Hello, hello, hello. What's going on, everybody? This is Troy Rawlings. Welcome to another exciting episode of Meet the. And today, we're blessed to have an amazing entrepreneur, philanthropist, consultant, jazz enthusiast, very important, champion, as he smoothly puts the bling in the in the he did the Michael Jordan and the y'all make some noise for Paxton Baker wherever y'all. What's going on, Paxton?
Hey Troy, what's happening, man? How you doing?
I'm good. Let's start there. Put that ring up in the joint again. The Washington Nationals. Real ring, real. Those are real diamonds.
The whole thing taps out to about 14 carats between the diamonds and the rubies and the sapphires and et cetera, et cetera. It's actually pretty heavy as well.
Yeah. I saw the joint when your son tried to put it on, and he's like, "I just could have. Maybe I should have got it sized." All right. Well, let's start. I'm gonna start there. Well, congratulations, the Washington Nationals are the 2019 Major League Baseball pennant champions. So how did that start? I wanted, because we was briefly talking a little bit before we got into the interview, and I was like, I'm not a huge baseball historian or anything like that, but I was asking you, was there any other teams that had a minority part owner? Not even minority owner means you own a, I guess, small part of the team versus
right.
the.
You were not the managing partner of the team.
Right. You're not
the managing partner. Right.
Yeah. Nowadays, you got to be specific with what you're saying. If you're saying minority and it's, you are African American descent, we'll get into that where you're from. But was the Washington Nationals the first team to have an African American owner on a team that won a championship?
No, the Houston Astros.
Okay.
The Houston Astros, when they won the championship in 2017, they had two brothers there, Sean Taylor, who's a very dear friend of mine, I think the world of him, and another very renowned brother in Texas, Milton Carroll. They were the two minority partners on the Houston Astros baseball team. So they would be the first two.
Now, were you an athlete? Were you a sports enthusiast? How did you get into Major League Baseball? How did that come about?
All right. So as far as an athlete, yes, I played basketball, football, and baseball in high school. And I still very much am an athlete. I still play active basketball. We got a game at my house from April through October, and the game is called The Pit.
I was about to say.
It's a very known game in DC. We've been playing since 2003, and a lot of brothers who play basketball in Europe and G League basketball players and college basketball players all come through. It's a 3-on-3 game, and it's a no take back, which makes the game really, really active and quick. So if you shoot the ball, you got to follow because you're not clearing it back to a free throw line. So no take back. The winner keeps the ball. We have an NBA 3-point line, so it's by 1 or 2 games to 11, and no soft calls and no out of bounds. So you actively get at it, and we have some great players from the DMV, DC, Maryland, Virginia area who come through on a regular basis, and we've graduated some younger brothers who've gone on to D1 schools, and so no, I'm still very much playing. My record this year is 20-4. Went a whole month without losing one game, 4-0, 4-0, 3-0, and finally last week went 2-1 after a week of vacation. So no, I still very much active, love sports, basketball in particular from a playing perspective. When I played shortstop, when I played in high school.
Yeah, I saw some over the years. I've seen some celebs that came through the pit. I've seen some bruises and some clips of the pit situation. They go hard. When you're playing make it, take it, and no clearing, the rebounds get a little gangster. Yeah.
It does. It's a quick game. Like very, very, very fast, concentrated game.
And I'd love to hear the audio from that. You know how they, I'm like, get it going.
Love to hear it.
All right. So how did you come about meeting? I guess you first met who would be the owners, and what year was it exactly that the Nationals came into play, or did you get with the organization?
If you don't mind, I'll give you a little history on it.
Okay.
So, the history of baseball in Washington, the Washington Nationals were actually founded back in 1869, and they were in Washington D.C. from 1869 to 1900. And then in 1900, the team disbanded for a year and reformed and became the Washington Nationals again. And I apologize, became the Washington Senators when they reformed. They became the Washington Senators. And the Washington Senators existed in D.C. In 1924, the early 1920s, they became a very solid baseball team, and they were in I believe it was the American League East, and they played the Yankees. They had a great pitcher named Walter Johnson. His nickname was the Big Train. There's a number of things around the Metro DC area, particularly in Bethesda, Walter Johnson High School, named after him. And they won the 1924 World Series, and they went to the 1925 World Series and the 1931 World Series. And the team lasted in Washington, D.C. till 1960. And then they moved and became the Minnesota Twins. Then they formed again and as the Senators. And in 1974, they moved to Austin, Texas, and became the Texas Rangers Baseball Club. So D.C. had the Nationals originally from 1869 to 1900. Then 1960, 61, they moved, it became the Twins, reformed, became the Texas Rangers, moved in 74. There was no baseball in D.C. after 1974. Now, the Montreal Expos, which was, I think the Expos started in the 70s. They were an exhibition team. They were one of the teams that got added to baseball. So they've kind of grown over time. They existed in Montreal up until 2005. At the end of the 2004 season, the team was pretty much bankrupt, and Major League Baseball took over the Montreal Expos. They shopped the team to Sacramento, California, Portland, Oregon, Las Vegas, Nevada, Jacksonville, Florida, Northern Virginia, and Washington, D.C. The then mayor, Tony Williams, and the D.C. City Council, after a lot of negotiation back and forth, ended up enticing baseball to come to the nation's capital. But one of the caveats of it was the team had to have significant minority participation in the ownership of it, which was just very forward thinking of the DC Council and the mayor. So MLB said, we're going to move to Washington. They set the acquisition price of the team at $450 million. And originally 13 groups were vying for the ownership of the team. Then it eventually was cut down to 8. Then it was cut down to 4. One of the 4 groups was the Lerner family. And the Lerner family are a prominent real estate development and holding company here in the Metro DMV, DC, Maryland, Virginia, for those who don't know. So I'll refer to that a number of different times in the DMV. And it's one of the more humorous questions I get asked is, how did you actually meet the Lerner family? And it's one of the ones for me, one of the greatest blessings and joy of my life has been building relationships and keeping relationships. And so my relationship with the Lerner family, I was introduced to my dentist, Dr. Ronnie Rosenberg. And so I tell people, the importance of relationships can never be underestimated, ever. And for me, it was literally my dentist introduced me to the Lerner family, and we met. The original meeting was supposed to be about 45 minutes. We left the meeting about maybe 2.5 hours later, and there were so many different touch points of myself with them, and just a genuine clicking kind of a thing. When I left, I was pretty confident leaving the meeting that day that the Lerner family was blessed with the honor of becoming the owners of the team, that I would certainly be one of their partners. So that's literally how our relationship began, was through my dentist who did the learner's teeth, Dr. Ronnie Rosenberg. And we kind of literally just built from there. So in 2005, the Expos moved to Washington, became the Washington Nationals Baseball Club. They had a great run in that 2005 season. They played in the old RFK Stadium. We were blessed with being able to be the group that was chosen in May. I think it was May 2, if I remember it correctly, May 2, 2006. And we were announced as the owners. It was a live press conference. And the next day we went and broke ground for what became the baseball stadium, Washington Nationals Park. And it literally just kind of grew from there. It's just like one of those lifetime experiences where you're fortunate enough to be the right person in the right situation at the right time. And a number of things just clicked and was a part of the group. The final kind of packaging around it was one of the four groups led by Stan Kasten. His group collapsed into our group. And we then were kind of like the team that Commissioner Bud Selig chose. And a lot of things kind of went on around it, but that's the core of what happened. And their group collapsed into ours. We bonded together, formed a bigger group. And Stan originally was the original president of the team. He stayed with us for 5 years. And then Stan is now president of the Los Angeles Dodgers Baseball Club. So a great guy. And that's how the relationship started, was with that.
Wow. Now, is this the same Stan from Houston? No.
No. John Taylor and Carol were the people who mentioned,
okay.
Right, who mentioned in Houston. Yeah.
So how? Well, first off, how does that feel to win? All right, so about 14 years, but we know time flies when you're not only when you're having fun, but when you're busy. So, like I said, they came out blazing. And the Nationals were always pretty much in contention for something. They were a great team. The representation in DC I'm a Baltimore brat. So, I'm never been a heavy baseball. My father was huge into baseball, but he was a huge Orioles fan, Baltimore, But to see what DC was doing, and this was before the whole National Harbor piece, right?
Yes, long before it. So when we broke ground in 2006 for in Southwest where the park is, that area was derelict. It is now the fastest growing area in Washington, D.C. And within 2 years, it's going to have the most per capita citizens in that ward, in that particular area. There is, without exaggeration, it's about 48 new buildings that have gone up. The park is amazing now. That whole area is, if you want to talk about a Renaissance area of Washington, D.C., that's exactly what that would be. And the whole experience there is like literally breaking ground there. That area was one of the worst areas of Washington, D.C., like bar none. We got into the park. The park opened in 2008, and literally real estate over there has gone through the roof, and it's a beautiful part of town with everything that's there. We originally, the Expos had been a kind of a perennial loser, like one of the lovable loser teams of baseball. So in building a new identity, once we got to our current general manager, Mike Rizzo, who, in my opinion, is a genius, a baseball genius, literally an incredible baseball mind, and does a great combination of combining statistics and which is kind of like the big thing now for data, big data. But he's also got gut instinct as well, and he just knows how to pick players, knows how to everything from rookies and in the draft system, because a lot of our great players, Ryan Zimmerman of one, came up through the draft. Anthony Rizzo came up through the draft. We do a great job of trading for veteran players, but also the draft as well. Mike Rizzo is the only person I've ever talked to around baseball. When you're in the GM box looking at the team with him, he can tell you every player on the field, where they came up with, like where they went to college, who originally drafted them, where they went before they got to the Nationals, from every player on both teams on the field. So you're looking down at 18 guys over the course of swapping an inning, and you're 9, they're 9. He's telling you where everybody came from. It's almost photographic
mind,
yeah.
and
but no, it's ingenious. And so we built a great team from the bottom up. We started to compete each year. Even the 2005 year, we competed up until about 3/4 of the way through the season. We were in competition for the wild card race. We won in 2012, 2013, then 2017, 2012, 2013, 2016, 2017 as well by way of the playoffs. And all those years we've had the best record in all of baseball. But perennially over the past 5-6 years, we're in the top 3, top 5 baseball teams period as far as win-loss and win percentages. So we have a great solid organization. The problem with a lot of Washington, D.C. teams and a lot of other cities get it is you get teams that can get to the playoffs, but they never win the big one. So for the National, we certainly suffered from that. And for the 4 years that we made the playoffs, 3 of those 4 years, we lost the final game on our home team on our field. And that was overwhelmingly and deeply, deeply painful, like just deeply, deeply painful. And this past year, as we were going through the ride into the playoffs, the win we had with the Milwaukee Brewers was literally our first elimination game as a team that we had ever made it past. So the way baseball works is you have 2 wildcard teams. The wildcard team with the better of the record gets a 1-game winner-take-all playoff on their field. So we have been scrapping since May. We were 19-31 in May, 12 games below 500, and that's when our turnaround began. So when we finally got to that 1-game playoff against the Brewers, we had already been like season tested. It had been a test for the whole season, and so we beat the Brewers, and then we went to Los Angeles and beat the Dodgers in that great turnaround game where we came back and won it dramatically with the grand slam late innings and turned around and beat the Dodgers, which was amazing. So we beat the Dodgers, and then after the Dodgers win, we go on and sweep the Cardinals, which was amazing because the Cardinals are a great baseball team, baseball club, and that was just like incredible to like sweep them. Our first sweep ever in a series. And then the big one against the Astros, and the incredible drama around that of being the only team ever in the history of organized sports that have to win every game on the road had never been achieved before. So we won the first 2 games in Houston, came home, lost 3 games in a row. And when that happened, everybody was kind of, and I shouldn't say everybody because the fans sure stuck with us, but many people were like, okay, well, here we go again, another DC baseball team that comes out and, a flash in the pan, gets out early, and then gee whiz, they lose it. Well, fortunately, we have to thank the Capitals for that. We have to thank the Capitals and the Leonsis family, who the Lerners are partners with. The Lerners are partners in the Washington. And I'm sorry, not the Castles, the Capitals. Capitals, and
you won with the Castles.
Right. There you go. So World Team Tennis Washington Castles, 6-time champions. So. But with the Capitals, they was the same thing for them. When they won it, it was dramatic. You got to win some games on the road. They ended up winning it in Las Vegas. DC finally got some grit. The Capitals actually kind of like broke the curse of like DC teams can get there. Because it had been since the Redskins won it back in the 90s, early 90s, that since the championship had actually been in Washington, D.C. So going back to Houston and winning those last 2 games on the road was nothing short of just beyond incredible. And being there, I was right behind Mike Rizzo sitting there for the final game in Houston. And like the feeling and elation of finally winning a championship and kind of like breaking through. And that game was so dramatic because we were behind up until the 7th inning when we started to kind of put together a comeback. The human emotion of like the highs and lows of something. And I'm sitting there watching the game and standing because we stood for a good portion of it and thinking to myself, either people are going to be sending me condolences notes saying, really, really sorry, like almost like a funeral, or I'm going to get congratulations notes and like the elation of it. And Mike Rizzo is kind of a superstitious guy. So and the bottom of the or the top of the ninth when we're up, like we're like the Astros are about one run away, and I'm like congratulating him. He's like, Pax, no, like no congratulations till the final out, until the final out is over. Then we can all kind of go into it. But once we turned it around, you could sense there was like the whole stadium. It felt like such a lonely thing to be there in Houston, and I had a Nats shirt on. With not like a lot of splash on it, but it was a national shirt, and we were there with like 40,000 people, and that was maybe after the game 1,000 people, maybe 1,000, 1,500 people stayed and participated in the celebration. So you're at a venue of 40,000 some people, and there's about 1,000 of you in there, cheering for your team. But
yeah, it feels
that's really nicely, and I never felt threatened or anything else kind of being there. But it was just a moving experience, and the elation for me is I hope to experience something like that again in my life. It would be my wish to do so, but there's nothing like doing it for the first time, which is what that was.
And then, like you said, to build something like that from the ground up. All right, yeah. Because we could stay here for, but I want to give people a little bit more history about because it's not the first time you built something that hadn't been something new, and I'm thankful you gave the history on DC. To think that the team that came initially out of DC planted seeds in different states and different cities that became great franchises. And then later on to come full circle. That's an amazing full circle story. Amazing full circle. And all right, for people that don't know, where is Paxton Baker originally from? Where are you from?
Born in Compton, California in 1960. And my family lived in Los Angeles until about 65, 66. We moved after the Watts riots. We moved to San Bernardino, California, and Rialto. It's called the Inland Empire. And I stayed until I was about 14 and ended up going to a boarding academy outside of Philadelphia called Pine Forge Academy, right outside of Pottstown, Pennsylvania. I was raised a Seventh-day Adventist, and still am a lifelong vegetarian from that. My mom I was born and raised a vegetarian, and here I am at 59, still a vegetarian. And so I was raised a Seventh-day Adventist, and I went to Seventh-day Adventist academies, Philadelphia, or Pottstown, at Pine Forge Academy outside of Pottstown, and Oakwood Academy in Huntsville, Alabama. So I traveled around a little bit in high school. And also from a college perspective, somehow ended up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, went to community college there. Then I went to college at Temple University in Philadelphia. So I've lived in 11 states and 17 cities. And
wow.
Lived in DC between 82 to 84. Then I moved back to the area in 1990 and have been in Chevy Chase, Maryland, since then. So I've lived here since 1990 in Chevy Chase. This is as long as I've ever been someplace, and I love this area a lot. It fit with me. It's got the East Coast energy, but it's not New York. It's not Philadelphia, but certainly more New York from just the pure energy and just the New York vibe and energy is like nothing else I've experienced inside the United States. There are other great cities in the world that have that energy. Tokyo, part of Indonesia, Cairo, Mumbai, Delhi, like just Shanghai from just an energy perspective. New York is to me on a whole different level. But right. DC got all of the cosmopolitan components of New York, and then we have all the embassies from all the different countries. So there's something very, very special about the energy that's here that I really appreciate. So I've been a citizen of the state of Maryland now since 1990, and this is home. I don't really plan on moving anywhere else. I've had the blessing and honor of being able to travel the whole of the world. I've done music festivals around the whole of the world, pre my BET days and during my BET days, and I've toured musicians around the whole of the world. But this is kind of very much where I like to come back home to and consider my home, and I consider myself a district person.
Yeah, love it. And let's for those that don't know, I'm glad you said it like that. People ask me, I'm from Baltimore. People ask me, oh, Baltimore, is it really hot? I was like, Maryland in its entirety. Plus, I love Baltimore. But Maryland in its entirety is a beautiful place. It can look like any place in the world. It can feel like any place in the world. That's why a lot of film people from the industry go and film Maryland for years. But like you said, DC, we always call DC a little New York because the hours and the energy and like you said, people from all over the world migrate to DC. But also, it's funny you mentioned we could take that a whole nother place. One of my pet projects is to do something on Benjamin Banneker. And it's funny you mentioned that DC reminds you of Cairo because of the whole, and that's, there's a lot of history there that I think people don't know about. But let's talk. So you went to Temple University.
Mm-hmm.
Did you move after you got out of college? What was the first thing? What was your major? What did you do out of college?
So African American Studies major, studied under a brother named Malefi Asante, who's the head of the program there at Temple and still there.
Wow.
Just a prolific writer, prolific historian, and has taught, mentored countless young people that have come up under him. So when I was at Temple, this is '84, was the year that they began working on building the first PhD program, African American PhD program. A number of other programs had undergraduate and master's degrees for African American studies, but to get your PhD, it was in urban studies, not in African American studies. So Temple established the first program for African American studies to get a PhD. So I was undergrad and a part of that movement to kind of like build it out. I had a relationship with Peter Leocoris, who was the president of the university, and Pat Swigert, who was the EVP and COO of the university, and I still am friends with him to this day. He went on to become president of Howard for 15 years and was president of SUNY New York in upstate New York. And his son actually works with me as one of my colleagues, Pat Swigert Jr. So I had a great undergraduate experience at Temple University, which really set the tone for my life. I started producing concerts while I was at Temple. They had a 24-hour jazz station, WRTI, where I really learned music and learned African American history, which gave me just a really good, solid sense of self. That was a game changer for me, like really truly learning African and African American history, which has laid the groundwork for the human being that I became. And I developed while there was a friendship with a brother named Kwame Afori Ate. And I met Kwame on a flight up to Boston and have built a lifelong friendship with him. He is now the king of the Achim people in Ghana and the second largest tribe in Ghana, and made me a chief in Ghana back in the early 2000s. And I've been to Ghana, 12 to 14 times. And I love Africa, and I've learned so much from the people of Africa, South Africa, Ghana, and Morocco, were the three countries in Africa that I've been to. My brother's been there for the past 5 years. He's been president of the Seventh-day Adventist system, university system in Kenya, and he's been to pretty much every country in Africa. I've been to 3. But that the African culture has just like deepened who I am as a person. So after Temple, I lived in Atlanta for about a year, and I was the assistant to the director of cultural affairs for the city of Atlanta. And I helped do the music programming for the Atlanta Jazz Festival, the Montreal Atlanta International Music Festival, and the first National Black Arts Festival. A year after being there for a short space of time, I moved to Miami Beach, and I worked with Philip Michael Thomas for the last year and a half of Miami Vice. And while I was there, and I incorporated my first production company, which began producing music festivals in the Caribbean. And I produced the Aruba Jazz and Latin Music Festival from 90 to 92. Then in 92, I started with the then director of tourism, Alan Chastanet, the first St. Lucia Jazz Festival. And I ended up producing that festival for 24 years. And Alan is now Prime Minister of the country of St. Lucia and is a great thinker in his own right. But in the Caribbean, I produced the Barbados, it was called Pennant Jazz Festival. I worked with a guy named Gilbert Rowe for 13 years there. In Trinidad, there was the Pan Jazz Festival, did that for 3 years. Over time, produced Cayman Islands Jazz Festival, 5 years, Turks and Caicos for 3 years, Bermuda for about 3 years, Anguilla 5 or 6 years. What am I missing? St. Martin. I've toured multiple musicians around the Caribbean, Carlos Santana, Wynton Marsalis, Kenny G, Gloria Estefan. I've done loads and loads of shows all throughout the whole of the Caribbean and South America. In 91, BT came down to shoot the Aruba Jazz and Latin Music Festival. And in 92, when I started the St. Lucia Festival with Alan, Alan secured BT to come over, and actually we collectively opened the door to a relationship with BT, and they ended up sponsoring and shooting the Jazz Festival in St. Lucia. And that's how I began my relationship with BT. A year later, I pitched them, along with Alan, to do a TV show, which ended up becoming Caribbean Rhythms, and I was the producer for that, and that's how I met my wife, Rachel. And she was on BT for about 10 years. She did Caribbean Rhythms, then another show, Planet Groove, and then another show, Live from LA. So we've been married now for 25 years, and we have 3 children, and we live here in the DMV. So that's clearly been one of the great strengths and anchors of my life. And Rachel's from Kingston, Jamaica. So, but I did a lot of work for years and years and years in the Caribbean with BT. I originally was a consultant with them, helped them launch BT Jazz in 1996, and then in '99. I joined the staff and became general manager of BT Jazz, and then a year later sold my production company to BT. And we literally, we at that point, we opened up and did worldwide events. We did a festival in Reykjavik, Iceland. We toured musicians along with the State Department, U.S. Department of State, and the MTV India throughout India. We did a festival in the Java Jazz Festival in Jakarta, Indonesia. And I did music festivals in South Africa, in Ghana, and we pretty much developed a worldwide footprint. So I had an amazing relationship with Bob Johnson and Debbie Lee and the family at BT, and I worked with them for 8 years in the consulting space, and then 18 years as an executive. And BT was purchased by Viacom in 2001, and then had a wonderful run at Viacom as well. And so from a growth and professional perspective, African-American studies major, then a music festival producer, and music festival producer, then TV general manager, and then award show producer, produced the Source Awards for a couple years, and then produced the Soul Train Awards for 5 years. And just had an amazing time with that as well. That was like a kid in the candy store of taking a great franchise, which it's something you kind of a household brand that you grew up with, and then having a chance to really kind of shape it. I met Don Cornelius back in the 90s, one time at the Soul Train Awards, went up and introduced myself to him. And then in the, I guess it would have been around 2010, again at the BET Awards when the OJs were getting their Lifetime Achievement, Eddie Levert, who's a kind of a surrogate father to me, reintroduced me to Don, and he put his hand on my shoulder and kind of gave me the mantle and told me it was up for the young guys to do it now. But it was a blessing to see him again and it's been a blessing to spend a little bit of time with him. So Soul Train was an incredible experience, and like my media career was just second to none. And I have this incredible fond memories and all the different friendships that I've built with musicians and entertainers and many people who were kind of like icons to me growing up. Eddie Levert from the OJs, Stevie Wonder, who I ended up producing United Nations with and United Nations Day with in 2012. But Stevie, Shaka, Nita Baker, Ron Isley, Dougie Fresh, loads of the classic hip hop artists, Chuck D, that like are my friends to this day, Dionne Warwick, Keith Sweat, I could like Freddie Jackson, Valerie Simpson, BB Winans, who I've been friends with since 1988. So just overall, it's just a blessed and an amazing career in music, and the friendships that I had while I was there, who have now kind of carried over into my current life today, one of which is Wolf Blitzer, who's one of my best friends in the world, and love him dearly, who we kind of broke new ground with Soul Train when we had him in the show, and he kind of crossed over to the African-American audience.
The whole audience, I will never forget, the whole audience looking up there like, is Wolf part black? Wolf, I thought his skin was dark. What is Wolf doing? Wolf. Like, he got that like Wolf.
Right. So that part of my life is I can just say the word thankful and blessed on that. So now in my afterlife, and thankful and really appreciative to turn the corners that I'm turning at this point in my life, and the things I'm doing now that are just very interesting to me. And
well, let's not say afterlife, because you're
well,
only. I know you look like he. I know he looked like he's like 30. He just said he's been a lifelong vegan and he got good genes. I know he looked like he in his early 40s, 30 something. But it, because that's one of the things I wanted to culminate with, but it's so much like the rich history of your experience is ridiculous. I want to go back to something you said about being a jazz lover and loving and doing the hard knocks way of learning a lot of the things that you had. I can sit down and I'll be ringing Paxton's phone a lot. No, I can sit down and get information from you. But before you went into the Caribbean, and we know about Caribbean music, we know about that. It's funny to me also, because I was about to say, oh, he must have, maybe he met Rachel pre-BET because he was in the Caribbean all that time. You didn't meet your wife until you got to BET.
Yeah, so Jeff Lee, who was president of BT for a number of years and ended up being general manager of Howard's TV station, he has a joke saying, I'm the only person that he's known in his lifetime who actually got paid to go meet my wife. So
Right.
when we pitched Caribbean Rhythms, the idea was to have, a beautiful young lady as the host of the show. So we ended up going down to Trinidad, Jamaica, and St. Lucia, searching for young ladies to become the host of the show. And Rachel and another young lady, Sandra Foster and Lisa Hanna, were the final three hosts chosen. And Lisa ended up, Rachel was Miss Caribbean and Miss Caribbean, Miss Jamaica Universe and Miss Caribbean at the time. And she had two beauty crowns that she had won. And Lisa was Miss World. And Lisa ended up becoming Miss Jamaica World and Miss World. And I forgot what happened to Sandra Foster, but Lisa ended up becoming a politician in Jamaica. I think she's still an elected politician there. And Rachel ended up becoming the host of the show. She won and became the host of the show. And we ended up developing a loving relationship with each other and have become, we like best friends and lifelong partners. So we have 3 children, and we're like blessed and thankful and happily married. And I forgot to mention, I did the festival in Jamaica as well for 13 years. I produced the.
No, you did. You did.
I don't know if I mentioned Air Jamaica Jazz and Blues, but I did that festival. And Alan at the time Alan Chastney was vice president of marketing for Air Jamaica. And we ended up starting 2 festivals together, the St. Lucia Jazz Festival, then the Air Jamaica Jazz and Blues Festival. So Jamaica has been a rich part of my personal culture and heritage. Of all the Caribbean islands, it's the one I've been to the most. And my family still goes back and spends generally 2 weeks a year. And then Rachel goes throughout the year to visit her family there. So she still has her mom and father and one of her grandmothers. Both of them are in there. One passed at 94, and the other one is 96 right now. So long livers in Jamaica. Good good heritage and good culture and good genes. So Jamaica's a very rich part of my life as well.
I'm going to jump back a little bit. So prior to your African American studies,
mm-hmm.
did you already have a love for jazz music? And I take it a lot of the curriculum then taught of African American studies, not just African studies, but of African American studies, talked about the cultivation of the music and all the aspects, how jazz came about and how the music formed. Prior to your African American studies, did you have that much? I know you had a better understanding, but did you already have a love for jazz?
Oh, yeah. So my older brothers and sisters introduced me to jazz music. This would have been like late 60s, early 70s. The first album I ever bought and purchased and kept was a Ramsey Lewis album called Mother Nature's Son. Mm-hmm. And the Beatles' White Album, orchestrated by Charles Stepney, who went on to produce so much of Earth, Wind & Fire's great hits and was Maurice White's mentor and big brother. And so I started collecting jazz music probably like around 9 years old. And I remember like there was the summer was like the summer of 70, I think it was. And the music I listened to that summer was Ramsey Lewis, Dionne Warwick, Earth, Wind and Fire, the Isley Brothers. And I ended up becoming, Verdine White is my big brother. I love him. He's like he's truly a brother to me and a mentor and a big brother. I love Verdine. And I've been friends with Ron Isley, Dionne Warwick. I love her as a big sister. So all of those people that summer, Ramsey as well, who I've worked with a number of times throughout the years, I became friends with. And, here I am all these years later, like, from the summer of 1970. It's like, I think, just veer for a second, that if you can open up your mind and get to the point where you believe your dreams and don't limit yourself, that there's a number of things that can come to you if you have an open mind and you're willing to take chances and not put blinders on yourself as to what actually could happen to you. I should mention Stevie as well, who is a big brother to me, and I love him dearly. All those people, like, I worship me, like they were like icons to me, and I listened to their music. And in a million years when I was younger, I never thought that I'd actually grow up and build friendships with them and have relationships with them. Like, that was something I couldn't have even dreamed or thought of at the time, but it came true. And I'm friends with all of them. And a number of people who I like kind of were iconic to me. The summer of Easter of 1976, I got a chance to, my brother was in seminary school in Berrien Springs, Michigan. And for 5 days of my life at 15 years old, every day, I got a chance to go see Muhammad Ali train. He was training for the Jimmy Young fight. And
Wow.
it was like kind of like one of those pinch me, I could actually leave the earth now, because he was my hero. And every day for 5 days, I get a chance to go to see him train and talk smack. And then later in my life as well, I got a chance to run across him. He was certainly declining in health at the time, but I ran across him again and just kind of shared how much of an impact that he's made on my life. So I like the blessings for me, and I know I've used that word in multiple different times, but it's like, that is the word. It's like a blessing.
There's no problem. There's no problem using it here.
And one other thing I should mention. So my mother is certainly the greatest influence on my life. My mother. And then there was a book that a gentleman gave me when I was 17 years old, which has been, outside of the Bible, has been the most prolific book of an influence on my life. Is a book called Think and Grow Rich by, the writer's name is Napoleon Hill. And Napoleon Hill was an iconic writer in his own right, and many people would never really know his name, but he was the principal writer of the Fireside Chats that Franklin Roosevelt read during the Depression, which helped lift the country out of the Depression and kind of prep it for its participation in World War II. And that book has been translated into pretty much every language, and it's considered the greatest success book of all time. And so Napoleon Hill was and is a prolific influence on my life. And then the other person I would kind of add into that is Harry Belafonte, who is my adopted father and a guiding light to me, and someone who's probably been like one of the biggest influences from a male perspective in my life has been Harry. And I just think there's not too many more human beings that have created that have been greater than that man. And so it's been a blessing for me. I met Harry when I was 31, and so the last half of my life, he's been a guiding light to me.
I was interviewing Will Downing, and I mentioned Harry Belafonte when we were just talking about album sales and something and things like that. And a lot of people don't know. We were talking about I was bringing that into play because when you see old clips of Miles or Quincy and people like that, you realize that, like you said, you mentioned this before. At one point in time, jazz was the pop music. Harry Belafonte also with the Calypso. I think the Calypso, I don't know how many it sold now, but it went platinum. It has sold 1 million copies.
Exactly. It was the first. So Harry, in his house, he actually has the record on his wall. It was the first, literally, when they were gold. It was the first gold record ever. Dale was the gold record, right, ever. And for me, the another influence is Clarence Avant, who I met Clarence and Harry
My
right.
God.
Clarence in 1991, the winter of '91, and Harry in the summer of '92. And the part for me with Harry was just like somebody who did so many different things well, and like literally acting, dancing, singing. But he was a movie producer and
Yeah.
a film producer and an activist and a writer, and the forefront of so many different movements. And his relationship with Dr. King was legendary, but Dr. King called on him because Harry brought things to the table. And that's one of the things I certainly learned from Clarence as well, from a relationship point of view. I mean, I mentioned early on in our conversation about my dentist, Ronnie Rosenberg, who introduced me to the Lerner family, but relationships are the core of what are the things that open doors for you. And to me, being a part of teams, being a part of movements, being a part of efforts, being a part of different things that you can build to make something great happen. And it's the bedrock of so many different things in human history is having relationships. And so Napoleon Hill certainly laid that out for me in Think and Grow Rich, the importance of it. But then I've been able to actually see it in motion. When I first met Clarence, I would go spend time at his office in Los Angeles and listen to just the wide array of different people that he would talk to on the phone. And it just opened up for me like, wow, if this is possible for him, why can't it be possible for me? And I've been fortunate enough and asked to speak to a number of different student groups or wide array of adults and students and young people, and just over time. And anything in my mind, anything I've achieved can be achieved by somebody else, because it wasn't like there was anything that special for me. I was the youngest of 6 children born on night in Compton, California. And my folks were, certainly financially at the lowest end of the bucket. And there was nowhere for me to go but up. I could not have been any lower than where I was from a financial bracket point of view. And like schooling in California in the 60s for Black people was not anything prolific. And so there's no reason for me to have had the success that I did other than simply like my mental attitude, which is something that Napoleon Hill encouraged you, like developing a positive mental attitude, being healthy physically, developing friendships and like being freedom from fear, having an open mind, and building, being open to build. So I've seen history. I'm a student of history. I'm an African American Studies major, and I spend a lot of time reading, thinking, looking at things around me. And I think that anything that one person can achieve, that anybody else can achieve. And American history certainly has had that. As we've been going through the coronavirus pandemic period, one of the guiding lights to me on lifting things in the country was the Michael Jordan Last Dance. But Michael was nothing necessarily that special about Michael in high school. And as he went throughout his career, it's like it was hard work, it was effort, it was focus, it was lifting yourself up above the surrounding circumstances that you were in. He had people who were there ahead of him: Dr. J, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Wilt Chamberlain, and then one of my favorites who I was honored to spend some time with as well was Bill Russell. And like those, each one of them, like they lifted their field, they lifted their discipline, they lifted their art. And it was through hard work. And none of them achieved anything without effort. I mean, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar being the greatest scorer in the history of the NBA, six-time MVP, 6 championships. Like, it was work. And for all the times throughout their careers that people counted them out, they kept putting in the work and the effort. And if there's one thing I try to pass on to young people, in particular when I speak with them, is like, you have to put in the work. And if you put in the work, success is pretty much assured if you put in the work. But you got to put in the work. And there's nothing about that that's easy. It's work. And so if you're an athlete, it's putting time in the gym. If you're a writer, I studied under Charles Fuller for a year at Temple University, the great playwright. And for Charles, he wrote an hour every day. And different days he purposely said, well, I'm gonna do more than 2 or 3 hours. But for the most part, every single day of that man's life, he wrote at least 1 hour every day. And so whatever your craft is, if you're willing to put in the time and effort to get to something, you can, but it's not easy, and it was not meant to be. Things that were just easy, it's like you don't become great by things being easy. You become great by overcoming something. And many
Right.
times yourself.
I tell people a lot of times that they were like, if I can get past this fear, I say, well, on the other side of fear is you. It's funny because you get past the external fear, and then you know all the intricate things that will stop you, the tired, but if you can get past you, there's nothing that you can't accomplish. Now, like I said, we could talk for, and I'm not putting putting the cap on it right now. This is not the afterlife of Paxton. This is so I want to
get to now. Yeah, I'd like to get to the now. Mm-hmm.
I want to get to and what exactly excites you forward? What is the thing that you want to do most now?
Boy, that's a good question. So now I'm in a number of different business disciplines now. So I do consulting work. I have a number of different clients, and I try to serve client interest. And when I left BET, I had almost a 3-year non-compete, and it turned out to be one of the just greatest things that possibly could have happened to me in my life. And so BT was owned by Viacom, and the non-compete, basically, I could not go do what I was currently doing if I wanted to keep getting paid for the next few years. So people call it the golden parachute, or your afterlife package, or whatever. It was a great walkaway package, and I wanted to keep my paper. So I started to think about, well, I've been in entertainment at the time for like 30 years. So what do I do now? So I learned a lot of things. One other thing I should mention that, like, in addition to relationships, that has been probably the core functionality of my life, and that's the word is volunteering. So I've volunteered like all throughout my life. I've volunteered, and I've hustled, I've worked, I've worked, volunteering and working. And volunteering, I've volunteered everything from, as a kid, I was in a group called the Pathfinders. They were the Seventh-day Adventist Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts. And we cleaned neighborhoods. And so we'd go to neighborhoods that were worse than ours and clean up neighborhoods, clean up parks, clean up corners, cleaned up abandoned houses. And I volunteered at Temple. That was one of the defining features for me at Temple University, was the amount of volunteer hours that I put in. And I taught community courses over the course of the summers at Temple as a student, free community continuing ed classes. And then as an adult, I've continued to be a prolific volunteer as well. So back in early 2000s, I think it was 2003, I joined an organization called the Congressional Award as Congress's official charity. And about 50 plus thousand young people in the program. And the components of the program are personal development, physical fitness, travel, and volunteerism civic duty. And they earn a congressional medal through those 4 areas. And it's a bronze 100 hours, silver 200 hours, gold 400 hours. And the gold medal ceremonies are done in the Capitol and attended by congressmen and senators who hand out the medals to the young people from their states and districts. And I've now been on the board for 17 years, and I've been chairman since 2007. And I put in a lot of volunteer hours behind that as something extremely meaningful to me. Volunteerism has been a change agent in my life, and I think it can be a change agent in everyone's life by way of going above and beyond something that's expected of you, that extra mile that Napoleon Hill talked a lot about, of that place where not that many other people go, unfortunately, but you have the capacity of going there yourself. So as a kid, doing paper routes or selling Christian magazines called Call Porter when I was a kid, it was like that seed of hustle, that seed of entrepreneurialism, that seed of volunteering has been there and has been integral for me throughout the course of the whole of my career. So so in my BET life, the being chairman of the Congressional Board has been something that's helped me open doors. I'm really enthused about young people. I'm enthused about the possibility for what they can do. I think with the advent of the internet and being able to just ask a question on Google or Safari, where you can ask one question and get reams of information, research is so much easier now than it used to be. So by way of getting back to answering your question about what excites me, the possibilities now, because of the internet, because of the different platforms that have appeared that people can build their own careers on and build a name for themselves on, letting people know what they stand for. I think that's just incredibly exciting. And in this latter part of my my post BET life, my post entertainment life, the possibilities of things, building relationships, building businesses, building out ideas. I do a lot of public speaking. I try to encourage and plant seeds in young people's minds all the time. And I let people know that the fact that I did it means it can be done. I was not a prolific student. I was not, like, from a learning perspective, I was never a great athlete. But because I work so hard physically and because of the amount of time and things that I spend thinking and pushing energy toward it, I've become successful. And so if somebody who wasn't really overwhelmingly gifted, somebody who has severe ADHD, who had dyslexia, who worked through being nervous and stuttering a bit at different points along the way. Bill Withers is another longtime, very dear friend and a big brother to me, who just passed recently. Bill was a prolific stutterer and overcame stuttering. And so all of those things, like, to me, the things that can be overcome through your work and through your imagination and through building relationships, that all of that fascinates me now. And I'm in a wide array of different sectors, from an entrepreneurial and professional specter now, if you will, and all of them excite me. And I've really been enthused to do things in the non-entertainment space, because that's pretty much what I had been in and probably would have remained in.
Not for the
right, things that come along. So I'm thankful for that.
Amazing. Paxton Baker, man, I appreciate you taking a short minute. Like I said, before we start wrapping up or anything, how can people reach out to you, get in touch with you if they want to find out anything about the philanthropic things that you're doing, or volunteerism, if they want to, even companies that may want to talk to you about consulting or speaking. And for those that I usually don't date the shows, but since we've been in such a prolific time in history, this 2020, the pandemic, the quarantine going into uprising, and like Paxton mentioned, well, I like to say is the best of times is the worst of times, but it's a phenomenal time to be living in right now, because everybody can do it, and it forces you to be innovative. It forces you to be innovative and still have your voice, and you have to. It's almost like you can't connect business without purpose. I guess it would be, it's maybe 10 or 100 times for us in the States, maybe for those in South Africa it's different, but of what ending apartheid was and the critical mass that happened worldwide, and this thing that's going on. The civil rights leaders that are still around right now are saying you've never walked down the street and seen, kids of different descents or Caucasian kids writing in chalk "Black Lives Matter" on their windows. They're painting it, and it's just an amazing time in history. And would you have ever thought that the very medium that you were involved with creating, in a lot of senses, is now becoming certain people's only outlet? So, because even though you said internet, but you were in a time of BET and entertainment and everything like that, where entertainment has always been therapy. It has always been an outlet to be involved with. The fact that you're in sports and entertainment, that is key. The fact what you said about relationships, that's a quote I'm damn near going to put it on a T-shirt and send it to you. But you said relationships are the core things that open doors for you, and that seems like it's key in your life. I definitely want to. We may have to do a part 2 because I want to delve into where that initiated. I can tell it's a part of your genuine personality. To like people, you seem like you love people, and that's a big core of relationships to me. If you want to be relatable, if you're approachable and people see that you're approachable, and then once you get there, there's some substance there, spiritually, mentally. It usually keeps people, and then the things you have to do to cultivate relationships. So,
Right.
yeah. Any other thoughts before we
on getting in touch? So congressionalaward.org. That's congressionalaward.org, and we have an Instagram page and a Twitter page for the Congressional Award. It's U.S. Congress is literally official charity, uscongressionalaward.org or U.S. Congressional Award Foundation. And so I do. That's like the most prolific organization that I do a lot of my work through. So so that's that. And we encourage young people, the ages 13 to 24, that can join the program. And I've had hundreds of students over the years thank me for the program. And as Congress has set it up in 1979, I've just been the steward of the organization. And but it can change your life, like by taking the time to put in something that you earn. It's not something you win. It's literally it's something that you earn. You earn a congressional medal. And I've had hundreds of parents come to me and thank me for saying that that's what got their kid over the edge to get a college scholarship or to get their kid into school. And the change that the young person went through when they really kind of caught the